and say shalom, everyone. It's great to see you all.
Shalom.
And
Chag Sameach.
Chag Sameach, Chag Hanukkah Sameach. We're devoting this class to Mikketz, Parshat Mikketz. We're on December the 14th. Parshat Mikketz. This is the second of the four parshiot that deal with the Joseph story. And you recall, Joseph is in Egypt. He has been incarcerated on the the charge that that Potiphar's wife says that you brought him down to be licentious with me, and even though she sets him up. There are a lot of questions about that story, but we'll leave that for a future year. What I want to do is frame the text that we're going to study today in the context of a larger global issue and how the larger global circumstances impact the family. And it strikes me from the outset of this class to say that here we are in a global pandemic, and while we have enough information and media to expose us to the way that the pandemic is playing itself out in the rest of the world, for I think every single one of us, this is playing out in unique ways in our own lives and in our own families. So for many of us, that means the sense of dislocation, that means the sense of anxiety, the disrupted rhythms of normal family life, whether your families are local and you can't get together as many of you are, or in many of our cases, such as my own, where family is far away and the normal rhythm of, periodic visits is not capable for us. So every family is experiencing the global situation in its own way. And that's a useful frame to understand the Parsha, because what you're dealing with in the Parsha is a global, at least to the extent that the world is known to our, the people inhabiting Canaan, Egypt, and Asia, a global famine. It's an epoch moment. And what we in modern societies are not aware of is how frequent these kinds of global calamities were in the past and how people had to deal with it. The fact that we are in a global pandemic was by some epidemiologists predicted. It was predicted that we would experience this major moment once a century, because pandemics have occurred on the average with that frequency, in this major way. So people who watch statistics were saying, yeah, we're due for a big one. The same way that, people who watch seismology say we're due for a big one, a big earthquake somewhere, God forbid. At any rate, big global epoch-making events impact small units of people, and that's the frame of this parsha. So I want to just put up a few things to orient ourselves for this morning, and this is for a couple of things that I've clipped out of the internet. So I'm calling this the real story, and that is to say, what's the real story behind the famine? And just as a general principle, this is from this is a Center for Applied Ethics, Lynette Parker. I don't really know who this person is, but I found this piece. The story of the human race. Migration is fundamentally the story of the human race from its origins to the present. Migration is an integral aspect of life on this planet. People move to survive. They move in search of food. They move away from danger and death. They move towards opportunities for life. Migration is tied to the human spirit, which seeks adventure, pursues dreams, and finds reason to hope, even in the most adverse circumstances. Such movement affects the community's migrants leave and the communities that receive these migrants. This movement also impacts communities along the route of transit. And there are so many important themes here in this little paragraph, which is in a unit of study on migration. But the point is that migration, especially in antiquity and even to today, is a fundamental aspect of human civilization, since we're all, when resources are depleted, we migrate to find new resources, or when circumstances are no longer capable of supporting life, or become it becomes inhospitable for life, people move. And human evolution, just even if you have a cursory knowledge of evolution, you'll know that the human species probably originated in Africa, and there were migrations throughout the course of human history. This is going back hundreds and hundreds of thousands of years. So the reason why we have populations all over the planet is because of migration, and migration was tied to the human spirit, and is tied to need, scarcity, and also hope. Okay, I just want to give you an example. This is the Irish famine, a monument to the Irish famine, and those of you, of course, who are familiar with this, this is here. This is the Famine Memorial in Dublin. One of these days, take a trip to Dublin, and you'll see the Irish famine, of course, was a devastating epoch-making event for Ireland, and for, I suppose you could say, the rest of the world, because what happened during the famine was that millions of Irish people emigrated from Ireland, many of them ending up in the United States, many of them end up in New York and New Jersey. In fact, the Delaware-Raritan Canal, which is not far from us, was built by Irish immigrants in the middle of the 19th century. If you walk along the canal just for a hike, and you'll see some plaques, you'll see, or just Google it, you'll see that this was built by Irish workers, many of whom died while working on this canal, which is unbelievable to imagine. So here you have it, 1845 to 1852, 1 million dead, 2 million immigrants. General rule that famines generate mass migration, or was Ireland the exception? Remarkably, despite long-standing demographic research into famine and intensive current interest in migration, there's no definitive answer. But there is urgent policy interest in the link between mass starvation and migration. After decades in which famines had declined almost to vanishing point, 2017, 2018 have witnessed a disturbing return, perhaps most starkly surrounding the war-induced starvation unfolding in Yemen. Meanwhile, Venezuela's economic collapse and the government's highly selective allocation of food and other essentials are causing unprecedented mass migration to the country's Latin American neighbors, with reports of severe malnutrition, deaths, and starvation. So here they're using the Irish famine as an example to compare and contrast contemporary famine experiences, namely in Yemen and Venezuela, most of which, those two of which are both natural and also political in nature. And one of the things that is said about the Irish famine is that the reason, one of the causes of the Irish famine was the potato crop, the blight of a certain pest or molds on potatoes, and this had to do with just agricultural knowledge and techniques and gene and crop rotation, etc., that just wasn't practiced and had devastating results. Another example of migration is around the Dust Bowl. Let's take a look at a couple of minutes. This is just the promo for the Ken Burns.
We watched the dust storm come up like the Red Sea closing in on the Israel children. And I'm telling you, it got so black when that thing hit, we all run into the house. And a lot of people in the crowd that was religious minded, and they put up pretty well on the scriptures. And they said, well, boys, girls, friends and relatives, this is the end of the world. This was a 10-year apocalypse that I don't think we can fully appreciate because we tend to pigeonhole stuff in American history and say, oh, this is the grapes of wrath, boom, done. It's much more complicated than that. And the story of the human beings that survived this 10-year apocalypse is one of the most moving and one of the most dramatic stories I think we've ever come across. This project was born 2 decades ago. Dayton Duncan wrote a marvelous book called Miles from Nowhere, in which he visited many of the least populated counties, some of which are in no man's land, what became the Dust Bowl. I met a number of people who told me these incredible stories about the dust being so bad that they would huddle in the shacks of their homes, put claws over their face. And they were just incredible stories, both in terms of an environmental story, of human folly, but also of human courage and suffering and perseverance. So that got me interested in it at first, and then a lot of other things, intervened, other films, other stories. But it was always on the list of films that I was hoping that Ken and I would get around to doing. It's the testimony of more than 24 human beings who lived through it, who survived the greatest man-made catastrophe, environmental catastrophe in American history, superimposed over the greatest economic cataclysm in world history, the Great Depression. First of all, this was a 10-year drought, so that was a longer than normal drought. It just didn't let up. It just started and kept on going. It was a harmonic convergence of bad things, of a badder than usual drought, hotter than usual temperatures, and more soil exposed for the first time than ever before in history, due to both bad farming practices and human nature, thinking that they could make a quick buck. And all those things combined to make it just hell on earth.
All the birds, everything was flying south. We could see this thing rolling in. And my brother told me he thought the end of the world was coming. Well, of course, that scared me half to death, and I wasn't sure about it.
We've been working on this project now for several years. I still can't fully comprehend what it must have been like to be in one of these black blizzards, towering mountain ranges coming at you more than a mile high, sometimes 200 miles wide, that could blot out the sun and make it inky black during the day, where you couldn't even see 3 or 4 feet in front of you, that there was not a safe place from the dust.
If it was one that was blowing more of a sand blow, as they were sometimes called, that would be closer to the ground, and these grains of sand, people would say, could strip the paint off of your car. Obviously, if you were out there and exposed to it, it could hurt like hell when it hit you. If you went inside, newspapers sold special gum tape to put around the edges of your windows and under your doors and other things to try to keep this dust from getting in. Nothing worked entirely.
Before these storms happened, there's an incredible phenomenon that built up a lot of energy, a kind of static charge.
I don't remember feeling it in my hair. It just kind of like your head tingles or something, your hair just kind of wiry.
If you reach out to touch a car, the electricity will jump out about 6 inches to meet you and knock you right flat on your butt.
It would short out the electrical system, the radio, other functions of the car, and so people took to dragging chains behind them just to ground automobiles.
It were tough times. It were really, really tough times. We didn't know what the devil was going to happen next.
It seems to me as if we were all just suddenly picked up and deposited back into the Old Testament Egypt with the Israelite people, as Woody Guthrie would say, that there were plagues of jackrabbits because nature had become so unbalanced. That there were plagues of locusts that afflicted these people. It wasn't just the dust storms, as if that wasn't enough for 10 years, that you had the poverty of the depression, that people are trying to get out, people are starving. This has got to be a cataclysm that we don't just see as an environmental parable,
which it is, but as a human story, a human drama, in some ways unequaled in this tiny, forgotten part of this glorious continent.
Okay, that's Ken Burns. I haven't watched this, and I don't know if you have seen any of that, but I brought it as an example, and of course it's an analogy. It's not exactly the same kind of example as the famine that we are experiencing in Canaan, but the idea here is that the famine is more or less a global phenomenon, and the stories are told on the family level. And so here is the family of Jacob with its own peculiar composition, telling the story of the famine. And we of course know that Joseph has successfully interpreted Pharaoh's dreams, 7 years of plenty followed by 7 years of famine, and where we're going to pick up our story in the text today is at the end of the 7 years of abundance. So let me just go right into this, and I'll read it in English, and I have the Hebrew on the side, and I'll make, as usual, references back and forth. The 7 years of abundance that the land of Egypt enjoyed came to an end. And the 7 years of famine set in, just as Joseph had foretold. There was famine in all lands, but throughout the land of Egypt there was bread. And when all the land of Egypt felt the hunger, the people cried out for bread, to Pharaoh for bread. And Pharaoh said to all the Egyptians, "Go to Joseph. Whatever he tells you, you shall do." Accordingly, when the famine became severe in the land of Egypt, Joseph laid open all that was within and rationed out grain to the Egyptians. The famine, however, spread over the whole world. So all the world came to Joseph in Egypt to procure rations, for the famine had become severe throughout the world. When Jacob saw that there was food in Egypt, food rations to be had in Egypt, he said to his sons, "Why do you keep looking at one another? Now I hear," he went on, "that there are rations to be had in Egypt. Go down and procure rations for us there, that we may live and not die." So 10 of Joseph's brothers went down to get grain rations in Egypt. For Jacob did not send Joseph's brother Benjamin with his brothers, since he feared that he might meet with disaster. Thus the sons of Israel were among those who came to procure rations. For if the famine extended to the land of Canaan. Now Joseph was the vizier of the land. It was he who dispensed rations to all the people of the land. And Joseph's brothers came and bowed low to him with their faces to the ground. When Joseph saw his brothers, he recognized them, but he acted like a stranger toward them and spoke harshly to them. He asked them, "Where do you come from?" And they said, "From the land of Canaan to procure food." For though Joseph recognized his brothers, they did not recognize him. Recalling the dreams that he had dreamed about them, Joseph said to them, "You are spies. You have come to see the land in its nakedness." But they said to him, "No, my lord, truly your servants have come to procure food. We are all of us sons of the same man. We are honest men. Your servants have never been spies." And he said to them, "No, you have come to see the land in its nakedness." And they replied, "We, your servants, were 12 brothers, sons of a certain man in the land of Canaan. The youngest, however, is now with our father, and one is no more." But Joseph said to them, "It is just as I have told you, you are spies. By this you shall be put to the test. Unless your youngest brother comes here by Pharaoh, you shall not depart from this place. Let one of you go and bring your brother, while the rest of you remain confined, and that your words may be put to the test, whether there is truth in you. Else, by Pharaoh, you are nothing but spies." And he confined them in the guardhouse for 3 days. On the third day, Joseph said to them, "Do this, and you shall live, for I am a God-fearing man. If you are honest men, let one of you brothers be held in your place of detention, while the rest of you go and take home rations for your starving households. But you must bring me your youngest brother, that your words may be verified, and that you may not die." And they did accordingly. They said to one another, "Alas, we are being punished on account of our brother, because we looked at his anguish, yet paid no heed as he pleaded with us. That is why this distress has come upon us. Then Reuben spoke up and said to them, "Did I not tell you, do no wrong to the boy? But you paid no heed. Now comes the reckoning for his blood." They did not know that Joseph understood, for there was an interpreter between him and them. He turned away from them and wept. But he came back to them and spoke to them, and he took Simon from among them and had him bound before their eyes. And Joseph gave orders to fill their bags with grain, return each one's money to his sack, and give them the provisions for the journey. And this was done for them. So they loaded their asses with rations and departed from there. I have to say, I'm going to end the text there. It's such a powerful, powerful scene. But in light of what I shared with you before, both in the Irish famine and the Dust Bowl, you can see, what I want to highlight here is the desperation of the family in search of food, and that in the moment of despair, we read the story, really detached from a larger meteorological and natural context. We read the story mostly focused on the characters, which is of course how we should read it. But I think what we neglect every time in reading the story is to identify with the sheer level of despair that people must go through when they have to feed their families. What would they need to do to find food? And this is not far in our own past in terms of memory of people who, of course, survivors during the Holocaust, finding food to survive, and to a certain extent, people who grew up in the Depression and trying to make ends meet, trying to figure out how to be as creative as possible with the limited means. One of the things, we're celebrating Hanukkah. Hanukkah, has as a staple potato latkes. The potato latke is an invention. I'll venture to guess, of necessity, because when the thing around you that you can eat is potatoes, you can be a little creative with it. You take, the classic recipe for latkes was not canola oil. It was schmaltz, right? You fried it in schmaltz because you wanted to preserve every part of, you had everything usable, basically. You took the potatoes, you grated potatoes, onions, and schmaltz, salt and pepper, and the truth is there's nothing more delicious than that. But it's a poverty food, right? Latkes are a food of poverty, okay? So we have this famine, and the family already is fragile. The family is fragile, the family of Jacob, because A, they've lost a child. B, they've lost a mother. C, there is the lingering feelings of guilt that the brothers have. D, there is the sense of the inconsolability of the father and his dominating presence in the family system, that everything needs to be a kind of compensation for him. And then, of course, the main idea, which is that they're in distress. They're in terrible distress. They don't have food. And that means they have to do the ultimate, they have to make the ultimate transgression in the geographic sense, which is to go over the boundary. They are supposed to be bound in the land of Canaan. That's their land. But when the land of Canaan cannot give them a way to subsist, they have to go beyond the boundary, and they have to go to the land of Egypt. Now, that takes us into the kind of what must they be going through? What must they be thinking when they depart for Egypt? So we are making one assumption in this text. The assumption is, vis-a-vis Joseph, the brothers know that Joseph was taken to Egypt. The reason why they know that he was taken to Egypt is because when the Ishmaelites / Midianites, and I admit, of course, the text is very complicated in terms of the chain of sale. I've studied that in different contexts, but they see the Ishmaelites, the Midianites pull them out of the pit, the Midianites sell them to the Ishmaelites, and the Midianites then sell them to Egypt. It's a little bit of a complicated chain of texts here. The point is, they know that they're heading south, and that their assumption would be, well, where would he have ended up? He wouldn't have ended up in the desert. He would have ended up in Egypt. So what would have happened to him in Egypt? That's the question. And so our Midrash is going to now look at the way a family in distress deals with this, and it's going to focus on a few things. So a long text, so you'll give me a lot of latitude here in bringing this text here. There are lots, and I'll stop where I feel like I need to stop to discuss it. There are lots of things going on in the way the rabbis present the story, given some assumptions that they have, whereas, of Joseph ending up in Egypt, and some assumptions that they have in terms of what we're going to call Ruach HaKodesh, which is translated as the Holy Spirit, meaning the spirit of knowledge, prophecy, a kind of in-depth understanding of the universe that is available to the patriarchs, or maybe not be available to them. So I'm going to go right into this text now. Here we go. Breshit Rabbah. Jacob saw that there was shever in Egypt. The word shever is going to be the key word that needs to be interpreted here. Vayar Yaakov ki yesh shever b'Mitzrayim. In the translation above, it said food rations, and I'm not sure exactly where they get the idea of rations, but it may be shever showing like ration coupons or food. I'm not sure, but shever, obviously, shever means something to do with food, whether it's it's a specific kind of food or not, is open for interpretation. So the Midrash first deals with the question, he sees. Does he really see? How could he see, etc.? And this we're going to do really quickly. Was Jacob in Egypt that he saw the harvest in Egypt? Because the text says Jacob saw that there was shever in Egypt. But his sons say to his sons in the very next verse says, Hine shamati, I heard. So regarding this, we can interpret that from the day Joseph was stolen, the Holy Spirit departed from him, and he saw but didn't see, and he heard but didn't hear. What I'm going to do, and this I'm going to do very quickly, is that the sale of Joseph, the kidnapping and sale into slavery, was so disruptive, an emotional event for the life of the family, that it completely it took the whatever spirituality out of Jacob's life. Jacob is in last week I did the verse, he refused to be consoled. So his bereavement triggered, I guess you could say, a clinical depression, a real, almost catastrophic depression. And so the catastrophic depression is also manifested in the fact that he cannot prophesize anymore. You have to have a certain kind of, mental state in order to receive prophecy. And since he is depressed, he's closed off from the Holy Spirit, as it were. Okay. Why didn't the text just say that there was food in Egypt? The text says that there was shever. We already have seen that there was a famine. What is the text teaching us? That there was shever. It says, rather, do not read the word as shever, but read it as sever, in that he saw in an aspeclaria, a divining glass, that there was sever, hope in Egypt. And what was the hope? That was Joseph. I'll explain in a second. He said to his sons, why are you looking at one another? You are strong, you are beautiful. When you go down to Egypt, don't go through one gate and don't stand in one place in order to prevent the evil eye from accosting you. Behold, I have heard that there is shever in Egypt. Ridu, go down there. What is Ridu, go down there? He saw that they would eventually go down there and become enslaved in Egypt. I'm doing this quickly. What I want to say is that there's a moment, the transition moment for Jacob is not in seeing that there's food in Egypt. What the rabbis are trying to say nicely is you go where there's hope. And that kind of touches on the theme that I started with, which is that migration is not only for food, but migration is an expression of human hope. I'm just going to glance back to that paragraph at the beginning. Here it says, migration is tied to the human spirit, which seeks adventure, pursues dream, and finds reasons to hope, even in the most adverse circumstances. Okay, so migration is about the need to hope, and the rabbis pick up on this very, very beautifully because they're making the pun on the word shever. They're saying shever, you shouldn't read it as shever, say sever, that what they're going down to Egypt for is for hope for survival, and because Jacob, at least the Midrash seems to indicate, Jacob has an inkling that maybe Joseph is there. Okay, all right. I'm going to skip this one here. The brothers went down. The text should have said the sons of Israel. There's two terms, Achei Yosef and Bnei Yisrael. We saw them interchangeable in the biblical text, chapter 42. Why does the text here use Achei Yosef? The word Achim seems to indicate a kind of closeness. Bnei Yisrael signifies, status. So the rabbis are interpret rather in the beginning they did not comport themselves with any brotherliness and they sold them. Subsequently, however, they regretted what they did and they kept saying, when are we going to go down to Egypt to bring our brother back to his father? And when their father told them to go to Egypt, they were all of the same mind that they should go there and bring them back. So what we're seeing here is that the rabbis see the brothers as a guilty bunch, and that as soon as they are finished selling Joseph, they need to retrieve him, except for the fact that the father, Jacob, dominates the psychological life of the family so much that they cannot leave him. They're waiting for the moment when they could go to Egypt. This is the idea here, that the brothers are waiting for the first opportunity to go and get him. And once the famine comes, the father says, go get him. They're unanimous in their desire to go and retrieve them to assuage their guilt for selling him in the first place. And now we get to the beautiful story. Rabbi Judah Bar Simon said, Joseph actually knew that his brothers would come down to Egypt to procure food. What did he do? He dispatched guards to all the points of entry and said to them, look, any person that comes to procure food, you must write down their name and the name of their father. Bring me the slips at the end of the day. And that is what they did. When Jacob's sons came to Egypt, every one of them went in through a different point of entry, and the guards wrote down their names. In the evening, they brought Joseph the slips. This one said, Reuben, son of Jacob. This one said, Shimon, son of Jacob, and Levi, etc. And thus, all the border guards brought in their slips. Joseph immediately said to them, close up all the storage facilities, just keep one open. They gave their names to the storage facility keeper and said to him, when these people come to you, arrest them and send them to me. 3 days passed and they didn't come. Joseph immediately ordered up 70 men from the king's palace and deployed them to look for the brothers in the market. He went and found them in the red light district, the prostitutes' market. And what were they doing in the red light district? They said, our brother Joseph is very handsome and good looking. Maybe he's working as a male prostitute in this cubicle. They arrested them and brought them to Joseph. Immediately, Joseph acted cruelly to them and spoke with them harshly, which means he behaved like a nochri, a Gentile. He took his chalice and began divination with it. He said, I see in this chalice that you are spies. They replied, we are honest men, but this is what our father ordered us to do. not to enter through one gate, etc. Joseph said to them, but what were you doing in the red light district? Weren't you afraid of being seen there? Certainly your father didn't instruct you to go there. They replied, we lost something and we were looking for it there. He asked them, what did you lose there? I see in this chalice that 2 of you destroyed an entire great city of Shechem, and afterwards you sold your brother to Arabs. They were immediately shaken and said to him, we are 12 brothers, son of our father. Joseph replied, where are the 2 that are not here? They said to him, one is missing, dead. The youngest is today with our father. He said to them, bring your youngest brother to me. Joseph then took Shimon, locked him up in front of them because he was the one who threw him into the pit. Joseph separated him from Levi so as not to enable him to give advice. Shimon said to his brothers, just as you did to Joseph, so are you doing to me. They replied to him, what are we to do? All the people in our houses are going to die in the famine. He said, do what you will. Now I'll see who will put me in jail. At that moment, Joseph sent a message to Pharaoh. Send me 70 of your men because I have found a group of thieves. I want to tie them up with rope. Right then he dispatched them, and Joseph's brothers were looking at what he wanted to do to them. Joseph said to the men, put this one in jail. When they got close to him, he let out a scream. That Shimon let out a scream. When they heard his scream, they fell on their faces and broke their teeth, as it is written, the lion may roar, the cub may howl, but the teeth of the king beasts are broken. Manasseh was sitting in front of his father. His father, Joseph, said to him, get up. Immediately Manasseh got up and smacked Shimon and cast him into jail, tied him up with ropes, and he said to them, this one is going to be a hostage until you bring your other brother. And they agreed. Immediately Joseph commanded, and they filled up their vessels. They returned to their father, who told them everything that happened. He replied, where is Shimon? They said, he arrested him as a hostage for our little brother. He said to them, you have caused me to be bereaved. And Reuben said to his father, you can put my 2 sons to death. And Jacob replied, are your sons not mine? And the Judah said to them, let the old man be until we run out of bread. Judah said to him, Abba, if Benjamin comes with us, he might be arrested or may not be arrested. But if he doesn't come with us, we are certainly going to die of famine. Better to have the uncertainty of this arrest than the certainty of our death. He said, who is going to serve as his guarantor? Judah replied, I will. As it is written, I will pledge myself for him. You may hold me responsible. Thus it is written, and Jacob saw that there was shever, brokenness in Egypt. So it's shever is a kind of theme. Shever being food, but shever also being sever, hope, and shever from the word lishbor, shvira, meaning to be broken. Okay. Now I apologize. It's a very long story. What it tells us in one context is, you think that Thomas Mann and Andrew Lloyd Webber were the first ones to novelize and create, extended, treatments of the story, and that is absolutely not true. The story of Joseph lent itself already from the earliest antiquity to the kind of elaborate, novelization or dramatization, simply because it's just a fascinating. It's an amazing story. I mean, I can remember, just telling the story around the Shabbos table to my kids, and it just, there at every point in the story there's something that you can identify with. There's something that the characters are strong, the motivations are universal. There is something that is relatable, and in this context, what is most relatable here is the global catastrophe is playing itself out on the micro level. That is to say, here is a famine, and the world is suffering from this famine, and one family has to find a way to manage in this global famine. And one person in power has the connection to this family. So one of the key little moments here is that Joseph knows ahead of time that the brothers are going to come. How does he know this? It's obvious. He knows that there's going to be a famine. He knows that the famine is going to affect Canaan. And he knows that it's going to be known that Egypt is the storehouse for the entire world because he planned it. It's almost like, I mean, here we are, day one of the rollout of the vaccine, okay? So there are certain things that we know right now about the vaccine, which is it's available. We know that it's available and that it's going to go first to, a certain cohort, and then it'll be wide and wide and wide. We know that within an undefined period of time, a large number, hopefully the majority of the population will get it. That's what we know. And that's a global piece of data. And on the micro level, it's going to be, when are you going to get it? And how are you going to get it, right? Where do you have to go? Who do you have to sign up for? How are you do you have to pay for it? Do you need to register? Do you need to make an appointment? Are you be able to go to Rite Aid to get it? Are you going to have to go to your doctor's? I mean, this is the details of it, but we all know that it's going to be there. And we know, if we read just a little bit of news, we know that there's a whole bureaucratic apparatus that is trying to organize this as best as possible. Okay, so likewise, here we have a famine, and here's the one of the genius administrators of the ancient world, Joseph, who knows, and he trusts, and he has this insight that they're going to come and get some food. So what does he do? He orders all of his border guards to watch out for one family, and when he gets the intelligence that this family is coming, he then closes all the border points or closes all the storage. He wants to catch them all at once. And that, I mean, it's a brilliant move to get them to, pen them all at once, except for the fact that they don't show up to any of the storage facilities. So what does he have them do? He has them fan out to look for him. And where are they looking for him? And this is probably the most interesting moment in the whole story. They're looking for Joseph in the red light district of the market. What is that about? Anybody want to venture a guess here? Why is and here I'm going to just stop to share for a second. Why do you think they went to look for Joseph in the prostitutes market? Go ahead, Milana.
Well, we know that he was a very good-looking boy, a young man, when they saw him the last time. So they figured he came to Egypt and maybe he didn't have money to live. So he found a solution to do it. But I would like just to say a little comment about shever.
Yeah.
Shever, that is a very important word in this text. Also, we say lishbor et hatzom, to break the fast, meaning to go and eat. So shever is really food. To break the fast, right, and to go to eat food.
Okay. So I don't want to focus too much on Joseph's sexuality here, although it's fascinating that the rabbis are picking up on just a bit of an item here. Okay. First of all, it says Joseph Yefet Toar V'Yefeh Mareh. So he was a handsome, good-looking boy. If you recall, the Ishmaelites and Midianites pick him up and they're taking him down. They sell him as a slave to the Ishmaelites and Midianites. Okay. So in order for the rabbis to even imagine that Joseph ends up as a male prostitute, okay, it means that they think, the Ishmaelites and Midianites, the rabbis think, or the brothers think that the best way that the Ishmaelites and Midianites could have gotten the most money for him is to sell him to a prostitution ring in Egypt. And here, a male prostitute is not for females. The male prostitute is for is a homosexual male prostitute. I think it's I want to say I think it's pretty obvious that this is not for heterosexual prostitution. This is for this is for homosexual prostitution in Egypt. And it seems to me, and I know I'm kind of stretching things, but this text, this midrash text, is coming out of the Roman world. The Breshit Rabbah, it's the 4th century. It's after the temple is destroyed by a couple of centuries. This is out of the Roman world, Roman Palestine, where the phenomenon of male prostitution and male homosexuality is not unknown. It's known, okay? And so there are hints here, and we studied this a little bit last year, that there is a bit of the hint of Joseph's homosexuality, that there may have been something there, okay? So I'll leave that out for now. The point is that opposite to what Joseph becomes, Joseph ended up being the chief steward of the household of Potiphar, one of the nobles of Egypt. Instead of looking at being the butler to one of the great people of Egypt, they look in the lowest caste of society. All right, that's their assumption, that Joseph would have ended up as a kind of rat in the prostitution market. Marlene, go ahead.
Well, you're pulling in one direction. Could it not be that the rabbis who were writing these things had their own Yetzer Hara, their own feelings of insecurity, because they only study with other men and they have to deal with that kind of thing themselves, so they just push it off onto their writings?
I wouldn't go that far. I wouldn't go that far. I mean, the whole idea of Joseph and gender and sexuality, this is a bit of a new fad in this.
I'm reading Rashi's Daughters, and
I don't think so.
Right, Diane? So
it's a new fad in interpretation. I went to it last year, and there's an Israeli satire show called Hayudim Ba'im, and they play up Joseph as this flagrantly, gay character. It's very, very funny. And yeah. What they're trying to focus on is that here is Joseph. What does he do? He does his nails. He's a bit effeminate. He's perfectly dressed. It plays up all the gay caricatures.
Yeah, but do you remember that he didn't want to sleep with that woman?
So that
exactly. Yeah.
So that also pointed that she was left holding on to his clothes, and he ran away. So you'd say
people who project the Joseph as a homosexual, say this is his perfect reason why he didn't want to sleep with Potiphar's wife, because he just didn't want to sleep with her because he was gay.
The guy, though.
Exactly.
Right, but I think the text itself, has much more ambiguity than that. Although, we can say it's plausible. My point is, though, that so the brothers have gone down to Egypt, and they're looking for him, and what's playing itself out in the context of the famine, and this is why the story is just so important. I mean, we saw a glimpse of it in that documentary. What makes Ken Burns such an amazing documentarian is that he looks at the personal story within the larger global cataclysm. So he did this with the Civil War, for example. He did it with other documentaries that he looked at individual stories, and he knows as a storyteller that the only way you convey the larger story is through the lens of the individual experience. Well, here we have the unique experience of this family. The family is in a moment of real crisis, and the family is in a moment of an internal psychological turmoil, because what's guiding this family is a sense of its own guilt. its own guilt. And then, but what is also governing this family is the sense of retribution. The retribution that Joseph is. Sorry, just a second. Press the wrong button here. The retribution that is possible that Joseph is going to have against the brothers. We'll return to the text to a second. I'll examine a bit of it more. Okay, so I'm sorry. So Joseph acts cruel to them, speaks with them harsh. He behaved like a nochri. Nochri is a strange, in the Bible means you are an alien, but nochri to the rabbis probably means that you act like a Gentile, and that obviously is presented as pejoratively as possible. And magic functions in the story because magic is perceived to be in the province of Egyptian culture. So Joseph behaves like a diviner, a magician. He's looking for a story, except, we, the reader, we know that this is just a game, like all magic. It's an illusion, right? And that we know that Joseph knows the real story, and he's just trying to torment the brothers more, and he torments them. And then, of course, there is this specific moment with Shimon. The fact that Shimon is the hostage is to the rabbis significant, because Shimon is the one that is seen to be responsible for having put Joseph in the pit to begin with. And they understand that the reason why Joseph keeps Shimon as a hostage is payback for the pit incident. Here, this moment where Menashe, the 70 men that Joseph summons, they're not strong enough against Shimon. But Menashe is like the it's the capo in the family. Menashe beats him up, beats up Shimon and puts him into prison. And then the last scene, which is Judah back to Jacob, trying to convince Jacob to let Benjamin come down. Judah understands that Judah is the voice of reason, and Judah is really the emergent political leader of the family. It's not an accident, of course, because Judah is later the dominant tribe of the Israelite Federation. So Judah here, despite the fact that he's not the firstborn, he is the dominant political force in the family. And he says, look, we're going to ride it out. And once at a certain point, we're going to run out of food. And when we run out of food, he's going to need to send us down if we want to live. And if he sends us down, we got to go with Benjamin, and we understand this. Okay. Sorry. Let me see if you have any questions or comments. I know there was a lot of material here, but anybody have anything to say? Go ahead, Alana.
In the text of the Torah, when they say something about their brother, that he is einenu, he is not, doesn't exist, he's not here, he isn't. Why isn't the dialogue continuing about him saying, what do you mean, to pull, to see what they would say? Why is it stopping and going into something else?
I think this is the great drama of this story. The story is built on a set of dramatic ironies. The dramatic irony in literature is when the audience knows something that the characters don't, and when the character knows something, one character knows something that the other characters don't, And that, elicits a certain kind of dramatic tension that only raises the quality of the drama and creates the need for resolution. So when the brothers say enenu, right, that is to say, he is not, our one brother is not here, immediately the reader, we know that that's not true. And so we're left with a series of puzzles. Do they not know where he is? We know where he is. Certainly someone should know where he is. And if he exists, why doesn't he communicate? Why? All of this
why doesn't he torture them to say something? Why is he leaving it alone?
He doesn't resolve this. He lets it go for he doesn't immediately come out and say who he is. I think that, to me, that's the much more profound tension, which is, here the brothers come down, they're looking for food, and rather than say, oh, my brothers, look at that, he puts them through such anguish because he has to elicit from them a certain kind of vengeance. Ellie, go ahead.
It's understandable that he wants to put them through something because of what they did to him. I can understand that. But the whole story that we told before that about the male prostitution, I find is such a stretch that it doesn't boggle my imagination. I just feel it's nonsense. I'm not a midrash lover, and I think everybody knows that. But sometimes they just pick things out of outer space, and it doesn't make any sense in the rest of the story.
So I'll tell you what makes sense here. What makes sense is that the rabbis are speaking to their own audience.
Okay. But there should be something in the text that says, well, from this one word, we can then fly out and make up this story.
Easily.
There isn't even that one
Easy.
word.
They pick up on the fact that he's good looking. And they pick up on the fact that around them is a culture that consists of male prostitution.
But every good-looking person is not a prostitute.
It's not true. Okay, but the point is, no, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to say that. I meant what in rabbinic culture, they live in a world where they're always at the boundary with the pagan Roman culture around them. And if you're a rabbi and you see a circus and a forum and gladiators and the body, the culture of the body and sexuality, and you are a rabbi immersed in this biblical tradition of the family, of purity and impurity, the notion of sexuality as sacred, and all of that, and whatever the truckload of data that comes with that, and you look at that and you go like, what? This is crazy, and you see this kind of behavior as being, as it's the worst kind of humiliation that a person could experience. It would be to be sold as a prostitute. That would be the worst humiliation that anybody could be. And if you're a male, the worst of the worst of the worst would be to be a male prostitute. That is to say, without your own power, without your own ability. I mean, he's a prostitute working for a supervisor. Okay, that's how bad it is. And the fact that they see that Joseph would have ended up in that way and look for him there only indicates how far removed they are from the reality where Joseph ended up as the chief butler to one of the highest ranking people in Egypt.
And it also highlights their guilt.
The guilt, exactly. You tell.
Yeah, also, on Ellie's point, Ellie, they didn't see their brother Joseph as having any skills, any ability, any talent other than reading dreams. That what was he going to do if he was sold? He didn't know how to do anything. So that would be a profession, if he's good looking, that he could sustain himself.
After what they did to him, do you think that they would go looking for him? I find that that's critical.
So this is exactly the point. this is where the rabbis, I think, are projecting onto the brothers. They're really, the brothers in the text are scoundrels, okay? They sell their brother, but in the text itself, and we didn't look carefully at in the text, you see this already with Reuben, who says, we are guilty for what we did. You see that they have some lingering feeling of guilt for that, because what they did was so extraordinary. They had to, and the truth here, the moral truth of the story is the sins that you do, the infractions that you do are going to come back to bite you. And they always do. Bob.
Two different questions. One is, why is it that in some places it says the sons of Jacob and other places the sons of Israel, and the changing text? That's question one.
Okay, so the biblical scholars point to the fact that there are layers and layers of the narrative tradition here that are superimposed on each other. That we really, we could put it under a microscope and try and tease away which strand comes from where. The rabbis make a different point. The rabbis say that when it refers to Achei Yosef, it's trying to highlight the need for unity. When it's highlighting Bnei Israel, it's trying to establish the need, the national aspect or the peoplehood aspect of it. But these are simply interpretive moves rather than what we really know. Yes, go ahead, Bob. Another question.
So it's not a message about the transformation that took place in Yaakov to Israel, symbolizing some need for transformation.
Hard to say, because you really have to look at all the places where the word Yisrael is used in Yoke and really try and make that kind of determination. It's hard to say.
The second question is, you didn't talk about it today, but why is it the rabbis say that the grain rotted in every place other than in the things that Jacob was responsible for?
Are you saying that the grain in Canaan rotted?
No, the Canaan in Mitzrayim, in terms of all the grain that was kept that he told for people to keep was no good anymore, but only the grain that he had kept was still useful.
So I'm not familiar with that midrash. Again, it would probably be the kind of the preferential treatment to Joseph and to everything that Joseph is connected with. So his grain doesn't putrefy.
I was just wondering, in the context of vaccine discussions, and which vaccines are better than others, of trust in government and stuff like that.
Diane, you had a question.
Yes, to your point about the rabbis and the midrash relating to the times, the guards at the gate were literate.
So that does look like it, right? They knew to be able to. Well, it's not saying they're literate. They said they're assuming that these Hebrews were literate, that they could write their name down.
Right.
They didn't have to read it. They just had to bring the paper, the slips, to Joseph, right? So
that was a level that is consistent.
What it makes me think about is, to what extent was there, this kind of border activity in antiquity? I know how it is to cross a border. We all know what it means to, you go, you present your passport, they look at your pass, they run today, they run it through an electronic reader, and when they put it through the electronic reader, your entire history comes up on a screen. In antiquity, I don't know if people had passports, but they certainly didn't have. But if you needed to present yourself as a foreigner, you had to have some kind of credential. Someone had to vouch for you. And so here what they're saying is, look, we vouch for ourselves. This is who we are. This is my name. This is my identity. I don't have a driver's license, but I can tell you I am Reuben, son of Jacob. That's what he's saying. Who are you, so that we can keep track on you? Because, every society wants to know who is a part of it and who's not.
And the rabbis are in a literate society, so they're projecting that onto the story also. That if they're literate, then Joseph and his brothers are going to be literate in the.
And I suspect that in rabbinic society, in that Roman world, you could spot a foreigner by dress or by any other kind of sign, and you would want to know where they're from. People, the Talmud is filled with these kinds of anecdotes of people, when so-and-so came from Babylonia, when so-and-so came from Palestine, from the West, right? They're talking about the movement of people. Well, the movement of people is not an unknown phenomenon in the ancient world. And so when people move, today we move, we have to present our papers. And I don't know how they necessarily, transacted in antiquity. They had to be identified somehow. Yeah. Ilana.
Does the Midrash or the rabbis, do they say something about them not saying, I'm the son of Leah, I'm the son of Rachel, Zilpah, Bilhah? Why? What did they want? Why this?
They wanted the father. He wanted the father because he basically wanted to establish the fact that that they were all, the brothers were coming down as one family. Of course, he would have known that they were his brothers if they said son of Leah, son of Zilpah, son of Bilhah.
Oh, but why didn't they think of saying it?
Oh, I think at this point they, the idea of being the son of Jacob superseded being the son of Leah, son of the mother.
And so if they're part of one family, different mothers doesn't mean that they're part of one family.
Indeed.
Patriarchal society.
Yeah. Marlene.
The male is the landowner, so that's where they get their status.
Indeed. Good. All right. Any other questions?
I forgot. What happened? Is their daughter not with them?
Interesting. She falls off the stage, basically. Dina, after the rape of Dina, this was 2 weeks ago, she never gets mentioned again. But it's interesting that she does appear as
in the plagues, I think later on.
Yeah, no, she's
few hundred years old.
No. That's Sarah Parasha. There's a midrash that says that the offspring of Dina was taken as a foundling to Egypt, and she was the one that was adopted by Potipharah, I think this is it, and she was the married by Joseph. So Joseph marries the daughter of the pregnancy of Dina and Shechem ben Hamor.
Wow.
That's pretty interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, and that was my question, which is there what is going on with Joseph's wife during this time?
Yeah, good question. Nothing is going on with Joseph's wife. She's also off the scene. She is a daughter of a priest, I'm sorry, and he is married to her in a kind of royal wedding, and produces 2 children with him, Ephraim and Manasseh, and we don't know much more about her. If you want to take the homosexuality theme, so Joseph, he has children with his wife, so I guess he might not be, but then again, you never know.
Who was that Manasseh that was in the midrash that you read? That Manasseh was the angry one.
The interpreter.
Manasseh is Joseph's son in this midrash, and he's made to look like he is a mafia capo, right? And he beats up Shimon, basically, because Shimon has power. Shimon has this secret Hebrew power to defeat 70 men of Pharaoh. The only way you defeat another Hebrew is with the secret Hebrew power. So Manasseh obviously has the code of martial arts passed down by Joseph, and Manasseh is able to beat up his uncle, Shimon.
But isn't that the same one that we use to bless our children on Shabbat?
Doesn't matter. We have to cut the piety out, the Midrash is not dealing with the piety. The Midrash is dealing with brute force here.
One last question. What's the connection of Mikket's Parsha to Hanukkah?
Well, it's, I would say it's coincidental that this Parsha always falls out on Hanukkah. I mean, we could, for most of us who are work in this field, we can do anything with anything. We can create connections with anything. So, but I haven't gone there. There are obviously lots of things that you can do, and I'm sure the Hasidic tradition, the mystical tradition does that. But as usual, the parshas fall out the way they fall out, and it's left for our own creativity to make connections.
Well, one connection is that the few win the many. Yosef
there you go.
Wins the brothers.
Good enough. Good enough. All right, folks. This has been wonderful. We'll see you next week.
An amazing story.
One of the great moments in all of scriptures next week, and we'll join back for Vayigash.